The sound of a shattering crystal glass echoed through the hushed church as Theodore Blackwell stormed out, leaving Tessa Verdon standing at the altar with nothing but shocked whispers and a broken arm to show for nearly 2 years of courtship. Her wedding day, June 17, 1878, would forever be marked not by joyful celebration, but by public humiliation and physical pain that radiated from her left arm. Injured when Theodore had roughly pushed her against the altar railing before announcing he couldn't go through with the marriage. "I can't do this. Not with her," were his parting words, his voice carrying through the small church in Humboldt, Nevada, where nearly everyone in the dusty mining town had gathered to witness what should have been the social event of the season. Tessa stood frozen, her white dress suddenly feeling like a shroud rather than a symbol of new beginnings. The murmurs of the congregation grew louder as the seconds ticked by, and the pain in her arm intensified until spots danced before her eyes. Her mother rushed forward, but Tessa could see nothing but pity in her eyes, the same pity that reflected in every face turned toward her. "Someone fetch Dr. Harrison," a voice called out, but Tessa knew the town doctor had left for Carson City 2 days prior. She'd have to endure this pain, just as she would have to endure the humiliation of being abandoned before God and everyone she knew. "Let me through," a deep voice commanded from the back of the church. The sea of well-dressed townsfolk parted, and a tall figure moved purposefully down the aisle. Tessa blinked through her tears to see a man she recognized only vaguely, one of the cowboys from the Rutherford Ranch outside of town. His clothes were dusty from the trail, and he looked wildly out of place among the Sunday finery of the wedding guests. She had seen him occasionally riding through town, but they had never exchanged more than a polite nod. "Miss, you need that arm tended to," he said, his voice gentle despite his rough appearance. "I'm Ryan Grant. I've set more than my share of breaks on the trail." Tessa's father stepped forward. "Now see here, with all respect, sir," Ryan interrupted, his eyes never leaving Tessa's pain-filled ones. "Your daughter needs help now. Dr. Harrison won't be back for days." Something in his steady gaze gave Tessa the courage to nod her consent. "Please," she whispered, the first word she'd spoken since Theodore's departure. Ryan carefully guided her to a pew, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle. "This will hurt," he warned, rolling up the delicate lace sleeve of her wedding gown, "but I'll be as quick as I can." Tessa bit her lip and nodded, determined not to cry out as he examined her swelling arm. The church had emptied considerably, but those who remained watched with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "It's a clean break," Ryan announced after a careful examination. "I'll need to splint it." He turned to Tessa's father. "Sir, I need 2 straight pieces of wood about this long," he indicated with his hands. While her father went in search of suitable materials, Ryan spoke quietly to Tessa. "That man wasn't worthy of you," he said simply, his blue eyes intense. "No real man treats a woman that way." Something in his straightforward declaration brought fresh tears to Tessa's eyes. "You don't even know me," she managed. "I know enough," he replied. "I've watched you at church with the children at the school where you help out. I've seen your kindness to old Mrs. Wilson when no one else would take the time." He paused. A man notices these things, even if he hasn't found the right words to say them. Before Tessa could respond, her father returned with 2 smooth pieces of wood that had once been part of a hymnal stand. Ryan nodded his thanks and turned to Tessa's mother. "Madam, I'll need strips of cloth." Without hesitation, Mrs. Verdon tore strips from her own petticoat. Ryan worked efficiently, positioning Tessa's arm carefully. "Take a deep breath," he instructed. When she did, he quickly set the bone with a sharp movement that drew a gasp from her lips. "The worst is over," he promised, his voice low and reassuring as he began to secure the splints with the cloth strips. As he worked, Reverend Patterson approached, looking uncomfortable. "Miss Verdon, perhaps we should reschedule." "There's nothing to reschedule, Reverend," Tessa's father interjected bitterly. "The groom has made his position clear." Ryan's hand stilled on Tessa's arm. "Begging your pardon, Reverend, but a woman like Miss Verdon shouldn't be treated as if she's the one at fault here." He looked down at Tessa, something unreadable in his expression. "A woman who shows such courage deserves better." The Reverend cleared his throat. "Of course, Mr. Grant, but if I may," Ryan interrupted, his gaze still fixed on Tessa. "I've admired Miss Verdon from afar for some time now. I never spoke up because she was spoken for." He hesitated, then continued with quiet determination. "I may not be a wealthy man like Blackwell, but I'm honest, I work hard, and I'd never leave a woman standing at the altar." Tessa stared at him in disbelief. "Mr. Grant, what are you saying?" Ryan finished securing the splint before answering. Then he knelt before her, still in his trail dusty clothes, looking up at her with earnest eyes. "Miss Verdon, Tessa, I'm saying that if you'd consider it, I'd be honored to take those vows with you today." He glanced around at the stunned faces watching them. "Not because I pity you, never that, but because I've watched you from afar and known you were the kind of woman a man should cherish." Tessa's mother gasped. "This is preposterous." "Tessa, you can't possibly let the girl speak for herself, Margaret," Tessa's father said quietly, studying Ryan with newfound interest. Tessa felt light-headed, and not just from the pain in her arm. "Mr. Grant, we barely know each other." "I know," he acknowledged. "And if you want time, I'll wait. But I also know that walking out of this church today with your head held high would be worth something." He paused, his voice dropping so that only she could hear. "And I promise you this, given the chance, I'll spend every day proving I'm worthy of the trust you place in me today." Tessa looked into his eyes, honest eyes that held no guile, no deception. She thought of Theodore, with his smooth words and expensive suits, who had just shown his true character in the cruelest possible way. Then she looked at Ryan Grant, a hard-working cowboy who had stepped forward when she needed help, who had treated her with nothing but respect and care. "Reverend Patterson," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word, "I believe we still have a wedding to perform." A collective gasp went through the remaining guests. Her mother began to protest, but her father silenced her with a look. "Tessa, are you certain?" her father asked, concern evident in his voice. "I am," she replied, surprising herself with her conviction. "Mr. Grant has shown more character in the last 10 minutes than Theodore showed in 2 years." She turned to Ryan. "I accept your proposal, sir." Ryan's face transformed with a smile that reached his eyes. "You won't regret it," he promised. And so it was that Tessa Verdon, with her arm freshly splinted and her heart in tumult, stood once more before Reverend Patterson. This time, the man at her side was not the banking heir who had courted her with flowers and poetry, but a cowboy whose steady hands had eased her pain, and whose honest words had offered her dignity. "Dearly beloved," the Reverend began again, his voice uncertain but gaining strength as he continued. Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple silver band. "It was my mother's," he explained quietly. "I carry it with me always for luck." When the moment came to recite their vows, Ryan spoke with quiet conviction, his eyes never leaving Tessa's face. "I, Ryan Daniel Grant, take thee, Tessa Verdon, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to cherish and respect you, to support you in times of hardship, to celebrate with you in times of joy, and to be faithful only unto you, for as long as we both shall live." When it was Tessa's turn, she found her voice surprisingly steady. I, Tessa Marie Verdon, take thee, Ryan Grant, to be my lawfully wedded husband." She paused, then continued with growing confidence. "I promise to build a life of honesty and trust with you, to stand by your side through whatever may come, and to be faithful only unto you, for as long as we both shall live." As Reverend Patterson pronounced them husband and wife, Tessa felt a curious sense of peace settle over her. When Ryan leaned down to kiss her, his lips were gentle, the brief contact a promise rather than a passion. "Mrs. Grant," he said softly as they turned to face the bewildered congregation, "shall we?" He offered his arm, the one on her uninjured side, and together they walked down the aisle and out into the bright June sunshine, leaving whispers and speculation in their wake. "My wagon's at the livery," Ryan said as they reached the church steps. "I'll take you to my home if that's agreeable. It's not much, but it's clean and solid." Tessa nodded, still trying to comprehend the monumental change that had just occurred in her life. She was no longer Tessa Verdon, jilted bride, but Tessa Grant, newlywed wife to a man she barely knew. Her parents caught up to them before they reached the street. Her mother's face was streaked with tears, and her father looked grim but resolute. "Tessa, you can still come home with us," her mother pleaded. This marriage can be annulled. No one would blame you after what happened." Ryan tensed beside her but remained silent, allowing her to make her own choice. Tessa straightened her shoulders despite the pain in her arm. "No, Mother, I've made my decision." She glanced at Ryan, finding strength in his steady gaze. "Mr. Grant is my husband now, and I intend to honor the vows I just made." Her father cleared his throat. "Grant, a word." He led Ryan a few steps away while Tessa's mother continued to plead her case. "Sir," Ryan said respectfully. James Verdon studied him intently. "I know of you by reputation, Grant. Rutherford speaks highly of your work on his ranch, but I need to hear from you directly. What are your intentions toward my daughter?" "To be a good husband to her, sir," Ryan answered without hesitation. "I meant every word of those vows. I know this isn't conventional, but I swear to you I'll protect and provide for her." James Verdon nodded slowly. "Tessa's dowry isn't why I married her," Ryan interrupted firmly. "Keep it for now if you wish, or use it to help her set up our home, but know that I can provide for her on my own." After a moment's consideration, James extended his hand. "Very well, son, but understand this. If you ever mistreat her, you'll answer to me." Ryan shook his hand firmly. "That's a promise you'll never have to collect on, sir." They returned to where Tessa stood with her mother, who had apparently given up her attempts at persuasion. "Your things will be delivered to." Her mother trailed off, realizing she didn't know where her daughter would be living. "The Rutherford Ranch for now," Ryan supplied. "I have a cabin there as part of my employment, but I've been saving to buy my own piece of land just north of town." Tessa felt a flicker of relief. At least she wouldn't be far from the only home she'd ever known. "I'll bring her to visit soon," Ryan promised, sensing her unease. Once her arm has had time to heal a bit. With final awkward embraces from her parents, Tessa found herself walking beside her new husband toward the livery stable. The streets of Humboldt seemed different somehow, as if the town itself had transformed along with her circumstances. "Are you in much pain?" Ryan asked as they walked, his concern evident. "It's bearable," Tessa replied, though in truth her arm throbbed mercilessly. "Thank you for what you did back there." Ryan glanced at her. "The splint, everything," she clarified. "You rescued me from humiliation as much as from pain." He was quiet for a moment as they reached the livery. "I won't pretend I haven't thought about you, Mrs. Grant," he corrected himself. "But I never imagined our first real conversation would be under these circumstances." As the liveryman brought around Ryan's wagon, Tessa studied her new husband in the clear light of day. He was tall, with broad shoulders that spoke of years of hard physical labor. His face was tanned from working outdoors, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often. His hair was the color of wheat, and those blue eyes that had held her gaze so steadily at the church now looked at her with a mixture of concern and uncertainty. "I hope you won't come to regret your impulsiveness," she said softly as he helped her up onto the wagon seat, careful of her injured arm. Ryan climbed up beside her and took the reins. "I'm not usually an impulsive man, Mrs. Grant. I tend to think things through carefully." He clicked to the horses, and the wagon lurched forward. "But I believe some opportunities come only once in a lifetime, and a wise man recognizes them when they do." As they left the town behind, Tessa felt the weight of watching eyes lift from her shoulders. The enormity of what she had done began to sink in, bringing with it a flutter of panic. She had married a virtual stranger out of desperation and pride. What kind of foundation was that for a marriage? As if sensing her thoughts, Ryan spoke again. "I know you're wondering if you've jumped from the frying pan into the fire," he said, his voice matter of fact. "So I want to make something clear. I expect nothing from you that you're not ready to give. We can take the time to know each other properly." Tessa turned to look at him, surprised by his perception and relieved by his words. "Thank you," she said simply. Ryan nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. "My mother always said that respect is the foundation of love. I figure we start there and see where it leads us." The road to the Rutherford ranch wound through sagebrush-dotted hills. The June heat was intense, but a breeze stirred the air as they gained elevation. Despite the pain in her arm and the emotional upheaval of the day, Tessa found herself relaxing as they traveled further from town. "Tell me about yourself," she requested. "If we're to be husband and wife, I should know more than just your name." Ryan seemed pleased by her question. "I'm 28 years old, born in Missouri but raised mostly in Colorado. My father was a miner who never struck it rich but never stopped trying. My mother was a school teacher before she married him." A shadow crossed his face. "Lost them both to influenza when I was 17. Been making my own way since." "I'm sorry," Tessa said softly. He acknowledged her sympathy with a nod. "Worked cattle drives for years, then settled here about 3 years ago when Mr. Rutherford offered me a permanent position. I'm his foreman now." He glanced at her. "It's honest work and it pays well enough that I've saved nearly enough to buy that land I mentioned. Another year, maybe less, and I'll have my own ranch started." "You've planned carefully," Tessa observed. "A man should have goals," Ryan replied simply. "Now, what about you?" "I know bits and pieces, but I'd like to hear it from you." Tessa considered what to share. "I'm 22, born right here in Humboldt. My father owns the Mercantile, as you probably know. I was educated at Miss Holloway's female seminary in Sacramento for 2 years. She hesitated. "I help at the school sometimes, teaching the younger children. I had hoped to become a teacher myself, but then Blackwell came along," Ryan finished when she trailed off. "Yes, Theodore is from a banking family in San Francisco. He came to invest in some of the mining operations and—" She shrugged, then winced as the movement jarred her injured arm. "My parents were pleased with the match." Ryan was quiet for a moment. "And you, were you pleased with it?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that before, not even her closest friends. "I thought I was," she answered truthfully. "Theodore could be very charming when he wanted to be. He talked about taking me to San Francisco, to Europe even." "But," Ryan prompted gently. "But there were signs I ignored," she admitted. "Times when his temper flared if things didn't go his way. Comments that cut deeper than they should have." She looked down at her splinted arm. "I never thought he would hurt me physically, though." Ryan's hands tightened on the reins, but his voice remained calm. A man who raises his hand to a woman isn't worthy of the name. They crested a hill, and the Rutherford ranch came into view in the valley below. A substantial main house, a large barn, and several smaller buildings scattered around it. Cattle grazed in the distance, mere specks on the vast landscape. "It's beautiful," Tessa said, taking in the scenery. "It is," Ryan agreed. "Rutherford's been good to work for. He believes in treating his men fairly and rewarding hard work." He pointed to a small cabin set apart from the other buildings. "That's our home, at least for now." Tessa studied the simple structure. It was small but appeared well maintained, with a small porch and what looked like a garden patch to one side. Smoke rose from the chimney, which surprised her. "Mrs. Rutherford must have sent someone to light a fire when she heard the news," Ryan explained, noticing her questioning look. "Word travels fast around here." As they approached the ranch, a middle-aged couple emerged from the main house. The woman hurried toward the wagon as Ryan brought it to a stop. "Ryan Grant, what in heaven's name is this we're hearing?" The woman called out, her tone more curious than condemning. "Ned rode in saying you'd gotten yourself married at the church in town." Ryan helped Tessa down from the wagon before answering. "It's true, Mrs. Rutherford. May I present my wife, Tessa?" He turned to Tessa. "Mrs. Grant, this is Abigail Rutherford and her husband, Thomas." Abigail Rutherford was a robust woman with kind eyes and practical clothing. She looked Tessa up and down, taking in the wedding dress and splinted arm with raised eyebrows. "Well, you certainly don't do things by halves, do you, Ryan?" She stepped forward and gently took Tessa's good hand. "Welcome to Rutherford Ranch, Mrs. Grant. I can see there's quite a story here." Thomas Rutherford, a tall man with a weathered face and salt and pepper beard, approached at a more measured pace. "Grant," he acknowledged with a nod. "Congratulations seem to be in order." "Thank you, sir," Ryan replied. "I hope this won't interfere with my duties. Tessa's arm needs time to heal, and I'd like to be available to help her." "We'll work something out," Rutherford said, his shrewd eyes taking in Tessa's pale face. "Your wife looks like she could use some rest after whatever ordeal led to this unexpected union." Abigail immediately took charge. "Thomas, have one of the boys bring their things to the cabin. Ryan, get your bride inside and settled. I'll be over shortly with some food and supplies." She patted Tessa's hand. "Don't you worry about a thing, dear. We take care of our own here." Tessa felt overwhelmed by their easy acceptance. "Thank you," she managed. "It's very kind of you." "Nonsense," Abigail replied. "Ryan's the best foreman we've ever had. If he chose you for his wife, that's good enough for us." As Ryan guided her toward the cabin, Tessa whispered, "They're very accepting, considering the circumstances." "The Rutherfords are good people," Ryan replied, "and out here folks tend to be practical. They judge by what they see, not by gossip." The cabin was simple but comfortable, with a main room that served as both kitchen and living area, and a doorway that Tessa presumed led to a bedroom. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, taking the edge off the coolness of the higher elevation. The furniture was basic but well crafted. A table with 4 chairs, a settee near the fireplace, shelves filled with books that surprised Tessa. "You read," she observed, moving closer to examine the titles. "Every chance I get," Ryan confirmed. "My mother made sure I valued education." He hesitated. "It's not much compared to what you're used to." Tessa turned to face him. "It's a home," she said simply. "That's what matters." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, not romance, not yet, but understanding. A foundation, as Ryan had said. The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was one of the ranch hands with Tessa's trunk. "Mr. Rutherford had me fetch this from town," the young man said. Said to tell you your father sent it over with some other things that'll be along directly. Ryan thanked him and brought the trunk inside. You should rest, he told Tessa. The bedroom's through there. I'll sleep out here on the settee until. He trailed off, coloring slightly. Until we're more than strangers who happen to be married, Tessa finished for him, appreciating his consideration. Ryan nodded. I meant what I said earlier. We'll take this at whatever pace feels right to you. Tessa moved toward the bedroom but paused in the doorway. Mr. Grant Ryan, she corrected herself. I don't know how this unconventional marriage of ours will develop, but I want you to know I appreciate your kindness today. Whatever else happens, I won't forget that. Ryan's expression softened. Rest now, Tessa. We have time to figure out the rest. As she settled onto the surprisingly comfortable bed, Tessa heard Abigail Rutherford arrive with food and supplies. The murmur of conversation from the other room was oddly comforting. For the first time since Theodore had pushed her and walked out of the church, Tessa felt safe. Despite the pain in her arm and the emotional exhaustion of the day, as she drifted toward sleep, Tessa found herself thinking that perhaps fate had a strange way of leading people where they needed to go, even if the path wasn't what they had expected. The first week of marriage passed in a blur of adjustment for Tessa. Her arm pained her considerably, limiting what she could do around the cabin. Ryan proved to be attentive without being overbearing, helping her when needed but encouraging her independence when possible. True to his word, he slept on the settee each night, never pressuring her for more than she was ready to give. They developed a routine. Ryan would rise early for his duties on the ranch, leaving breakfast prepared for her before he went. He would return midday to check on her, then again in the evening when his work was done. Their conversations grew longer and more comfortable with each passing day. Tessa learned that Ryan had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was relaxed. He discovered that she had a passion for literature that matched his own, leading to long discussions about favorite books as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. On the 8th day of their marriage, Tessa's parents came to visit. The reunion was awkward at first, with her mother barely concealing her disapproval of Tessa's humble new living arrangements. Really, Tessa, Margaret Verdon whispered when Ryan stepped outside with her father, you could still come home. This experiment doesn't need to continue. Tessa shook her head firmly. It's not an experiment, Mother. It's my marriage, and I intend to honor it. She glanced toward the doorway where Ryan stood talking with her father, his posture respectful but confident. Ryan is a good man. But darling, this cabin is barely bigger than your bedroom at home, her mother protested. And what do you even know about being a rancher's wife? I'm learning, Tessa replied simply. And the cabin is temporary. Ryan has been saving to buy his own land. She straightened her shoulders. Besides, I'd rather have a small home with a man of integrity than a mansion with someone like Theodore, her mother sighed. I suppose that's fair after what happened. That boy showed his true colors and they weren't pretty. She reached out to gently touch Tessa's splinted arm. How is the pain? Better each day, Tessa assured her. Ryan is very careful with me. Something in her tone must have conveyed more than she intended because her mother's eyebrows rose. I see, she said thoughtfully. Perhaps this arrangement isn't as practical as I first assumed. Before Tessa could respond, the men returned. Her father carried a small wooden box which he placed on the table. Tessa, your mother and I have discussed it, and we believe this belongs to you, regardless of the unusual circumstances of your marriage. He opened the box to reveal a substantial amount of money. This is your dowry. We had set it aside for you, and it's rightfully yours. Ryan started to protest, but James Verdon held up a hand. I know what you said at the church, Grant, and I respect it. But this isn't about you providing for Tessa. It's about giving our daughter what was always intended for her future." Ryan looked at Tessa, clearly leaving the decision to her. After a moment's consideration, she nodded. "Thank you, Father. We'll put it to good use." After her parents departed, promising to visit again soon, Tessa found Ryan standing on the porch, looking out at the land beyond the ranch. "You didn't have to accept the money," he said quietly when she joined him. "I meant it when I said I could provide for you." "I know," Tessa replied. "But my father was right, it was always intended for my future." She moved to stand beside him. "Our future now, you mentioned wanting to buy land of your own. This could make that happen sooner." Ryan turned to look at her, surprise evident in his expression. "You'd want that?" "To build a ranch with me." "Yes," Tessa said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "I married you, Ryan. That wasn't just for show or convenience. If we're to be husband and wife in truth, then your dreams become mine as well." Something shifted in Ryan's gaze, a warmth that hadn't been there before. "There's a piece of land I've had my eye on," he said, his voice thoughtful. "About 5 miles north of town. It has good water, decent grazing, and enough flat ground for a proper house." He hesitated. "I could take you to see it if you'd like." Tessa smiled. "I'd like that very much." The next day dawned clear and warm. Ryan had arranged for one of the ranch hands to drive them in the wagon, as Tessa's arm still made riding horseback impractical. The young cowboy, a freckle-faced youth named Tommy, kept a respectful distance, allowing them privacy as they surveyed the property. The land was even more beautiful than Ryan had described. Rolling hills covered in grass that rippled like water in the breeze, a clear stream cutting through the property, and a natural plateau that offered a perfect building site with views in every direction. "What do you think?" Ryan asked as they stood on that plateau, the morning sun casting long shadows behind them. Tessa turned slowly, taking in the panorama. "It's magnificent," she breathed. "I can see why you want it." Ryan pointed toward a grove of cottonwood trees near the stream. "I thought the house could go right here, facing east to catch the morning light." He traced a line with his finger. "The barn and corrals over there, protected from the north wind by that rise." As he spoke, Tessa could almost see it. A proper ranch house with wide porches, outbuildings arranged for efficiency, gardens, perhaps even children playing in the yard someday. The image took her by surprise with its clarity and the longing it evoked. "Yes," she said, her voice firm. "This is it, Ryan. This is where we should build our home." He looked at her, a smile spreading across his face that transformed his features. "You're sure? Once we commit the money, there's no going back to town life." "I'm sure," she replied, returning his smile. "I married a rancher after all. It's time I became a proper rancher's wife." The decision made, events moved quickly. Ryan negotiated the purchase of the land, and with Tessa's dowry added to his savings, they were able to buy not only the property but also a small herd of cattle to start their operation. Mr. Rutherford was supportive, allowing Ryan to continue as foreman while he established his own ranch. "A good man deserves his own piece of ground," he said when Ryan thanked him for his understanding. "Besides, we won't be losing you entirely. Neighbors help each other out here." Throughout July and into August, construction began on their new home. Ryan hired men from town to help with the building, but he worked alongside them whenever his duties at Rutherford's allowed. Tessa's arm healed enough for the splint to come off, though it remained weak and sometimes ached when rain was coming. She threw herself into planning their new home, working with the carpenter on the layout and features she wanted. If the men were surprised to find a woman with such definite opinions about roof pitch and window placement, they kept it to themselves after seeing the way Ryan deferred to her judgment on these matters. "It's your home too," he told her when she asked if he minded her involvement. "I want you to be happy there." By mid-August, the house was taking shape, a sturdy 4-room structure with the possibility of expansion as needed. The barn was built first and already housed their small but growing herd, tended by a young ranch hand Ryan had hired to live on the property while construction continued. As summer faded into early autumn, Tessa found herself settling into her new life with increasing contentment. The strangeness of her hasty marriage receded as she and Ryan grew to know each other better. They still maintained separate sleeping arrangements, Ryan in the cabin's main room, Tessa in the bedroom, but their companionship deepened with each passing day. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch of their cabin after dinner, Ryan broke their comfortable silence with an unexpected question. "Are you happy, Tessa?" She looked up from the sewing in her lap, surprised. "Yes," she answered honestly. "Are you having doubts?" "No," he said quickly. "Not at all, I just—" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of nervousness. "Our marriage began so unconventionally. Sometimes I wonder if you regret it." Tessa set aside her sewing and turned to face him fully. "Ryan, if you had asked me on my wedding day if this is where I would be 3 months later, I would have thought you mad." She smiled softly. "But now I can't imagine being anywhere else." He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Our house will be ready to move into by the end of next month. I was thinking we might. That is, if you're willing." He took a deep breath. "I thought we might make it a true beginning, a real marriage in every sense." Tessa felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she didn't look away. Over the past months, her feelings for Ryan had transformed from gratitude to admiration to something deeper that she wasn't quite ready to name. The thought of becoming his wife in truth no longer frightened her. Indeed, she had found herself thinking of it more often lately. "I would like that," she said softly. "A new beginning in our new home." The relief and joy that crossed Ryan's face made her heart skip. He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you," he said simply. October brought cooler temperatures and the completion of their house. It wasn't large by town standards, but on the open range it stood as a symbol of permanence and possibility. 4 solid rooms with a stone fireplace, real glass windows, and a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Ryan had insisted on proper wooden floors throughout, remembering Tessa's comment about cold mornings in the cabin. The day they moved in was clear and crisp, the sky a deep blue that seemed to go on forever. Their few belongings from the cabin were supplemented by wedding gifts that had been stored at her parents' house, and newly purchased items that Tessa had selected with care from her father's store. When the last of the wagons had departed, leaving them alone in their new home, Ryan turned to Tessa with a smile that held both nervousness and anticipation. "Welcome home, Mrs. Grant," he said, his voice husky with emotion. Tessa looked around at the rooms they had planned together, at the furniture they had chosen, at the man who had rescued her on what should have been the worst day of her life, and instead had set her on a path to happiness she hadn't imagined possible. "It's perfect," she said, stepping into his embrace. That night, as the first stars appeared in the sky outside their bedroom window, Ryan and Tessa truly became husband and wife. His touch was gentle, his patience infinite as they discovered each other in this new way. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Tessa felt a sense of rightness that transcended anything she had known before. "I love you," Ryan whispered into the darkness, the words both a statement and a question. Tessa raised herself on her elbow to look into his eyes, visible in the moonlight streaming through the window. "And I love you," she replied, the truth of it filling her completely. I think perhaps I have for longer than I realized." The smile that lit his face was worth everything they had been through to reach this moment. He pulled her close again, and as they drifted toward sleep, Tessa thought that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings led to the most perfect destinations. The first year on their own ranch brought challenges and triumphs in equal measure. Winter descended early and harsh, testing both their preparations and their partnership. Ryan spent long days ensuring the cattle had feed and shelter, often returning to the house half frozen but determined. Tessa kept the home fires burning literally and figuratively, making their small house a haven of warmth and comfort. Spring arrived with renewal in more ways than one. The land greened with fresh grass for the growing herd, and Tessa discovered she was expecting their first child. When she shared the news with Ryan, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for: joy, tenderness, and a protectiveness that manifested in his insistence on hiring additional help for the ranch so he could be more available to her. "I'm not an invalid," she protested with a laugh when he tried to take over the task of gathering eggs one morning. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Not my wife, and not my child," Ryan replied, his expression both serious and tender. "Let me fuss a little, Tessa. I've waited a long time for this family of ours." She relented, understanding that his concern came from love rather than doubt in her capabilities. As her pregnancy progressed through the summer months, they settled into a rhythm that allowed her to maintain her role in running their growing ranch while acknowledging her changing physical needs. Their small herd had nearly doubled with the spring calving, and the first crops planted in the fertile soil near the stream had yielded well. By the time autumn painted the hills in golds and reds, the Grant Ranch was established enough that neighbors began to take notice. Invitations to community gatherings arrived more frequently, and Tessa found herself welcomed into the circle of ranchers' wives who exchanged advice, recipes, and friendship. In November, with the first snow dusting the distant mountains, Tessa gave birth to a son. The labor was long but uncomplicated, with Ryan pacing outside the bedroom while Mrs. Rutherford and the midwife from town attended to Tessa. "You have a fine boy, Mr. Grant," the midwife announced when it was over, ushering him into the room where Tessa lay exhausted but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. Ryan approached the bed with reverence, his usual confidence replaced by wonder as he gazed down at his son's tiny face. "He's perfect," he whispered, sinking onto the edge of the bed beside Tessa. "Just like his mother." "We'll call him James," Tessa said, "after my father." She looked up at Ryan. "And Daniel for his middle name after yours." Ryan's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he nodded. "James Daniel Grant. A good, strong name." He leaned down to press a kiss to Tessa's forehead. "Thank you, my love." As young James grew, so did the ranch. Ryan's careful management and Tessa's keen business sense proved to be a powerful combination. By the time their son was walking, they had expanded their property by purchasing an adjacent parcel of land, nearly doubling their acreage and water rights. Life wasn't without its difficulties. A dry summer when James was too threatened their hay crop, until Ryan organized the neighboring ranchers to divert water from a higher stream. The following winter brought illness to the community, including a frightening week when James developed a high fever that left both parents sleepless with worry, until it broke, through it all, the foundation of respect and love that Ryan had spoken of on their first day together only strengthened. They disagreed at times. Tessa's independent spirit occasionally clashed with Ryan's protective instincts, but they always found their way back to each other, their commitment unwavering. On the morning of their 5th wedding anniversary, Ryan woke Tessa before dawn. "Get dressed," he whispered, careful not to wake 4-year-old James or his sister Emily, just turned 2, who slept in the room across the hall. "What are you planning?" Tessa asked, but Ryan merely smiled and pressed a finger to his lips. She dressed quickly in her riding clothes, curious but willing to follow his lead. Outside, she found 2 horses saddled and waiting, along with a small pack tied to Ryan's saddle. "Mrs. Rutherford is coming over to watch the children," he explained, helping her mount. "I've arranged for us to have the day to ourselves." They rode as the sky lightened from black to deep blue to the pink and gold of sunrise. Ryan led her up a trail to a ridge overlooking their ranch, now a thriving operation with a larger house, substantial barns, and well-maintained corrals. From this vantage point, they could see not only their own land but also the town of Humboldt in the distance. Ryan dismounted and helped Tessa down, then spread a blanket on a flat rock. From his pack, he produced coffee in a thermos and fresh biscuits wrapped in a cloth. "5 years," he said as they sat together, sharing this simple breakfast while the world awakened around them. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I saw you standing in that church, and sometimes it feels like I've loved you all my life." Tessa leaned against him, his solid presence as reassuring now as it had been on that tumultuous day. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Theodore hadn't left me at the altar?" she asked. "Or if you hadn't been in town that day?" Ryan was quiet for a moment, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "I try not to think about it," he admitted finally. "The idea of you married to that man, or of never having met you properly, it doesn't bear considering." Tessa turned her face up to his. At 33, Ryan's features had matured, lines at the corners of his eyes deepened by years of working in the sun and wind. To Tessa, he was more handsome now than he had been at 28, his face marked by experience and character. "I'm glad every day for whatever twist of fate brought you to that church," she said softly. "Even the broken arm seems a small price to pay for the life we've built." Ryan smiled, the same smile that still made her heart quicken after 5 years of marriage. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small velvet box and placed it in her hand. "I should have given you a proper ring years ago, but there never seemed to be enough money when we were getting started." Tessa opened the box to find a gold band set with 3 small diamonds. "Oh, Ryan," she breathed. "It's beautiful. The stones represent our family," he explained. "You, me, and our children." He took her hand where his mother's simple silver band still encircled her finger. "You don't have to replace that one. I thought perhaps you might wear both if you wanted." With fingers that trembled slightly, Tessa removed the silver band and placed it carefully in the box, then held out her hand to Ryan. He slid the new ring onto her finger, where it caught the morning light and scattered tiny rainbows across the blanket. "I have something for you too," Tessa said, reaching into the pocket of her riding jacket. "Though it's not something I can wrap." Ryan looked at her questioningly. "We're going to have another baby," she told him, joy bubbling through her words. "In the spring." The look of delight that transformed his features was everything she had hoped for. "Truly?" he asked, his hands moving to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "Another child." Tessa nodded, covering his hands with her own. "Dr. Wilson confirmed it yesterday when I went into town." Ryan laughed, the sound echoing off the hills. He pulled her into his arms and spun her in a circle, his excitement too great to be contained. When he set her down, he kissed her with all the passion of a man still deeply in love with his wife. "So much for needing 3 diamonds," he said when they finally broke apart. "We'll need to add another one now." Tessa smiled up at him. "Or perhaps more than one in years to come," she suggested. "I've always thought a large family would be wonderful." Ryan's expression grew serious. "Are you happy, Tessa? truly happy with this life we've made?" It wasn't the first time he had asked her this question over the years, but her answer had never wavered. "More than I ever thought possible," she assured him. "When I think of that day at the church, I realize that what seemed like the worst moment of my life was actually the best. If Theodore hadn't left me, I would never have found you. Sometimes what looks like an ending is really the beginning of something far better." As the sun rose higher in the sky, they remained on the ridge, talking of the past they had shared and the future they were building. Below them, their ranch, the physical manifestation of their partnership, spread out in well-ordered beauty. Beyond it lay the town where their unlikely story had begun, and all around them stretched the open country that had shaped them both in different ways. When they finally rode back down to their home, where their children awaited them and another was growing beneath Tessa's heart, Tessa thought about the strange, winding path that had led her here. From jilted bride with a broken arm to beloved wife and mother, from town girl to capable ranch woman, it had been a journey she could never have predicted, but would never wish to change. That evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in colors no artist could capture, their children playing nearby, Ryan took Tessa's hand in his thumb brushing over the new ring that symbolized their growing family. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "some might say I was the lucky one that day finding a bride when I'd only gone to town for supplies." Tessa smiled, remembering. "And some might say I was fortunate that a cowboy with medical knowledge happened to be in church that day." "I think," Ryan said, his voice deepening with emotion, "that we both received a blessing neither of us expected or believed we deserved." He raised her hand to his lips. "And I, for one, intend to be grateful for it every day for the rest of my life." "As do I," Tessa replied softly, leaning her head against his shoulder as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Their story, which had begun with abandonment and pain, had transformed into one of enduring love and shared purpose. It wasn't the path either of them had envisioned, but as they sat together in the gathering twilight, surrounded by the life they had built with their own hands and hearts, both Tessa and Ryan knew it was infinitely better than anything they could have planned. In the years that followed, the Grant Ranch prospered, becoming one of the most respected operations in the region. Their family grew with the addition of 2 more children. Another son, Thomas, named for Mr. Rutherford, who had been such a steadfast friend to them. And finally, a second daughter they called Abigail, in honor of the woman who had welcomed Tessa so warmly on that first overwhelming day. As their children grew, so did the legacy Ryan and Tessa built together. James, their firstborn, showed his father's affinity for working with cattle and his mother's head for business. Emily developed a talent for healing, eventually training with Dr. Wilson and becoming the first female physician in Humboldt. Thomas inherited his father's love of books and his mother's teaching ability, eventually taking over the school where Tessa had once helped out. Little Abigail, the youngest, combined her father's quiet strength and her mother's determination, managing the household accounts from an early age with remarkable precision. Through droughts and abundant years, through winters that tested their endurance and summers that rewarded their hard work, Ryan and Tessa remained each other's constant. Their unusual beginning became a story they told their children, and eventually their grandchildren, a reminder that sometimes life's greatest blessings arrive in unexpected packages. When asked by those who didn't know them well how they had met, Tessa would share a meaningful glance with Ryan before answering simply, "He came to my rescue when I needed him most." It was truth enough, and the deeper story remained a cherished part of their shared history. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Their children organized a celebration that brought together friends and family from miles around. As the sun set on that June evening, so similar to the one when they had first exchanged their vows, Ryan led Tessa away from the festivities to the quiet of their garden. "I have something for you," he said, his voice still able to send a thrill through her after all their years together. From his pocket, he produced a small package wrapped in silver paper. "I've been saving for this almost as long as I saved for our land." Inside, Tessa found a delicate gold locket. When she opened it, she discovered a tiny piece of white lace on one side and a small photograph of their family on the other. "The lace is from your wedding dress," Ryan explained. "I kept a piece all these years from when I had to cut the sleeve to set your arm." His eyes, still as blue and direct as they had been on that long-ago day, held hers. "I wanted you to have something that represented both our beginning and all we've built since." Tears filled Tessa's eyes as she closed her hand around the locket. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Just like the life we've made together." Ryan took her in his arms, his embrace as strong and sure as it had always been. "Do you remember what I promised you that day in the church?" he asked. "That I would spend every day proving I was worthy of your trust." Tessa nodded, her head against his chest where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. "And you have, 1,000 times over." "I'll keep trying," he promised, "for however many years we have left together." As they returned to their celebration, surrounded by the family they had created and the community they had helped build, Tessa reflected on the strange, wonderful journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as desperation and pain had blossomed into a love story more beautiful than any she could have imagined for herself. Sometimes, she thought, as Ryan's hand found hers in the gathering darkness, the broken places in life are where the light gets in, where unexpected grace transforms what was shattered into something stronger and more precious than before. Her broken arm had healed long ago, leaving only the faintest ache on cold mornings to remind her of that day. But the heart that had been broken by betrayal had been made whole again by a man who had spoken vows to her when she needed them most, and had kept everyone in the years since. And that, Tessa knew with absolute certainty, was the greatest blessing of all.